Tapisa. My name is Tapisa. Hihiktaluk Saumio Yauyunga. I'm originally from Hihiktaluk, which is now known as Baffin Islands. Nunavumiok. I'm a person of Nunavut. My family now resides in Iqaluit, but prior to relocation, they were situated around like Kimirut area, just right outside of Kimirut. My great grandparents are Anugakuluk Kelly and Pichilala Kelly, and Jomi, and I don't know how to say her name because I just learned it, but Tiguliak, I think. But my great grandfather Jomi, the school in Iqaluit is named after him. I just found this out recently, but he helped the Hudson Bay at one point to build community in Iqaluit. So they, fostered a way to get there, and that's where they decided to settle, which is kind of weird, but it's such a significant part of history, especially for Inuit and for non-Inuit, and it's cool to be a part of that, to be, his great granddaughter. Yeah.
That is cool.
Yeah.
How long have you been living in Mohkinstsis?
I have been here for 16 years, which is wild to think about. But I left Iqaluit when I was 9 years old, and I lived in Nova Scotia because my dad is non-Inuit. He's from, his ancestors are originally from Ireland, Scotland, and somewhere in the Norwegian area. And so they settled in the inland of Nova Scotia. So my dad went to work up north for the Hudson Bay Company, which is kind of weird too, because he's like a mechanism for settlement, which is kind of weird to, comprehend. But he met my mom, and then when I turned 9, we moved to Nova Scotia, and I lived there for 10 years, and then I moved here to Mohkinstsis.
Lots of ties to Hudson Bay and
Yeah, yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about the work you do?
Yeah, it's hard to answer that question. I think what I do is that I do advocacy in different areas, and I started in nonprofit, and I started it because I learned about truth and reconciliation, but then I learned about like settler colonialism, and then I learned about like the effects of settler colonialism, and then I learned all of those things had an impact on me and my family, and I was just like, because of what I knew as reality was not real, that reality, people who believe in that reality doesn't know it's not real either. And so I just decided that I wanted to disrupt, those, relationships to indigenous peoples, indigenous communities, and create space for learning, and hopefully they'll become advocates themselves.
Can you tell me a little bit more between that relationship between settler and colonialism?
Yeah, so because for myself personally, it was such a learning journey to understand how settler colonialism had a relationship to me. And it wasn't like a two-way relationship. It was just like there was this imposition of this identity, and where I experienced racism, marginalization, and many different forms of harm, and then realized that all of those things happened to me, and it wasn't because of it is what happened to me and not who I was truly meant to be. And I really took that seriously because I didn't want to have this idea of myself through the lens and the eyes and the actions of, dominant communities. And so that relationship, I wanted to be a part of it. And so I kind of like just took action in being present, reflecting, and understanding what was manifesting in my life, and attend to those things and learn how to, become like healthy, to maintain well-being, not just for myself but for my children too, because they you know I grew up hating being Inuk, but they're growing up loving to be Inuk, and I think that was very, very important to me, because I don't want racism to really knock them down. It's going to happen, but at least they'll have a little bit of a sturdier platform where it's not internalized, and they understand that is an external perception of them, and it's not about them. It's a reflection of the person doing it, if that makes sense.
So when did you start this journey?
It's been about 8 years. So in 2016 is when I learned about like settler colonialism, and that was the year after the TRC calls to action had come out, and it was just 8 years ago I decided that's what I needed to do, and it was advocacy for self and advocacy for the community. But yeah, 8 years. It's wild too.
How have you seen yourself grow through these 8 years?
I've grown a lot. I think there's still a lot more to learn from and like work on. But from 8 years ago, where I didn't really know who I was, like as an Inuk, to where I am now, where I'm pretty confident that I know myself as an Inuk, and I don't know. I think it's blessed me in many, many, many ways, being like trying to be the best version of myself in my indigeneity.
Do you have any advice for anyone looking to go on a similar journey?
I think believing in yourself and believing in your voice is my biggest piece of advice, because like when we experience settler colonialism, like our voices were silenced, and it's really hard to speak and be yourself when you don't have a voice, and you can't really communicate what your needs are. So working on your voice. And I didn't have to work on my voice in community always. Like I have opportunities where I can speak up and have a voice that way, but it's like to maintain it, I look to singing that to help me, or like throat singing to help me, or like writing a poem, or like those kind of things to like, for me to believe in my voice, I have to be active in that too.
How can settlers better hold space for these journeys?
Move over. Just kidding. I think there are a lot of different opportunities that settlers can do, and I think it's like if you're in that space, you're in that space for a reason, but you have to hold your judgment and understand it's not about you personally. And that's kind of what I try to like educate also, because we're all a part of like settler colonialism, we've all been colonized in a way. So their belief systems and values have been like, they continue to perpetuate those like ideas that, get rid of, the Indian in the person, like they continue that. And so they have to recognize like what they have been taught needs to be reflected on, and like it's not up to Inuit or Indigenous peoples to disrupt their image of Indigenous peoples. They really have to do the work themselves and listen to Indigenous peoples, but they have to do they need to reflect and understand where those like beliefs and values came from and how they can disrupt them themselves.
I agree.
Right?
So, What is an urban Inuk?
I've been thinking a lot about urban indigeneity lately, and I was taking notes this morning about like nebulous and nebula and like, those amorphous spaces where there's like no definition, and where it's kind of vague and unclear. And I really think like urban indigeneity, it's unclear right now. And I think there's a lot of bias from like real Inuit creating these conversations that invalidate urban Inuit experiences. And so like how I feel as an urban Inuk, because I haven't lived in my community in 25 years, 26 years, 25, 26, is that the worldview, our beliefs, and our values, they travel, right? They're like in this paradigm, and they're meant to adapt to the current situation and the current reality that we live in. And so I see like my urban indigeneity is that I know that my values and my worldview come from the land. I'm in Baffin Island, but I really truly see that it has adapted to my current, atmosphere, and I can be as Inuk as anyone else in this space because of that. And it may look a little bit different. Like I know I'm totally a city girl, and I love that part of me, but I don't know. I'm here. I exist urbanally as an Inuk, and I think that's how I feel about that right now. I was having a conversation with my cousin last year because we hadn't. I was home for the first time in like 25 years last year, and then my cousin just like thought that I lived this like dreamy, like no conflict life. And then I like told her, I was just like, yeah, but like I lived in poverty. I experienced this. I experienced that. And so like it's not that those things describe or define Inuitness, but it's like we also have similar experiences of like intergenerational trauma, whether it's there or here, if that makes sense. Yeah.
It does.
Yeah. And she just like was just so surprised by that. And I was just like, well, yeah, dude, like it's not it like I was messed up everywhere. But yeah.
It's a wild shock to have, though.
Yeah, yeah. And she was just like, I think that like even just having that conversation with her just kind of like changed it a little bit for herself, and just like, it's yeah, it's common, I think, and not a lot of people talk about like the urban Inuit experience and how that shows up, and especially with intergenerational trauma, and getting the resources that we need to disrupt that from continuing.
Well, what do you wish, or what would you tell non-Inuit about Inuit and urban Inuit?
That we are of value too, and our experiences and our worldviews, our beliefs, and our values are different. However, there is similarities in values and belief systems. It's just like we came to those values and belief systems in a different way, but we have, I don't know, there's a connection that people are not very like they're not honoring that connection, I guess.
How can non-Inuit better hold space for Inuit voices and urban Inuit voices?
I think it's like being like you're in the position where you are like a part of indigenous or like indigenization and decolonization, like try to reflect on the voices that you are like highlighting and empowering, and then think about who are you missing, like what is incomplete here, and then try to bring in like a diverse, um, you know, diverse experiences into those areas.
Can you touch on the relationship between decolonizing and indigenizing?
Yeah, I think indigenization is, oh, I love this question. Thanks. This is kind of like a light bulb moment for me. I think like indigenization is trying to create or transform spaces for like indigenous structures, like indigenous governance structures, worldview, and values. However, those spaces are like relegated to the surrounding local nations. So their realities, their concepts, their personhood, peoplehood are being, placed into spaces that are being indigenized. And I think decolonization is like disrupting, um, you know, practices, laws, policies, etc., to better accommodate and change the way systems treat Indigenous peoples. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Steve,
That was a light bulb moment. Thank you.
So, did you have a mentor?
Um, I didn't really at first, and but I really looked to, you know, public figures from our communities that became like an aspiration for me to, you know, become, and then they would inspire me to keep going, I guess. Like your mom, your Nana Hovak. Like I remember like it was in 2017, June 13th, just kidding. In 2000, but it was in 2017 where I like saw your mom on the internet, and I was learning about like Kakani and Tuni and how they like and relative to like Inuit, and I was just like mind blown because I've never really seen anyone like publicly being Inuk, I guess. And so that's when I got my first tattoo, is in 2017. I was just like, that's this means a lot to me. And then later I manifested it. I was just like, Hovak is going to give me my first like traditional tattoos. And then she did these ones, which is, yeah, it gives me chills when I think about it. But yeah, so like your mom. And then I was thinking about like Tanya Tagak last night, and she like, I've been thinking about like what is an like authentic Inuk or authentic Inuit, and I think that's kind of how I was able to feel more comfortable as like within my urban like Inukness, because they like are pushing boundaries on what is authentic and who is authentic in our communities. And I was thinking about Tanya, and she's just like shows up, and she's like totally like punk rock, like, and she just like, but she's being herself. And I really, really appreciate, those, I don't know, opportunities for me to see myself being represented as Inuk, but also like as being punk rock, also as being like a little emo and moody and stuff like that. So, and then last year or the year before, I started talking to my Ayakuluk Naluk Arnukuk, and she has done a lot of work, especially in the building of Nunavut. And then she's done her master's in education. And then, so she became my mentor, and she really helped me understand how to come into these like experiences of post-secondary as my best self. And she just kind of helps me understand more of like my family history, and then connecting that to current like experiences.
To go to the representation, how important is it to have representation, Inuit
Oh,
representation?
yeah, definitely so important. And like, I remember like Susan Glugark, like, because she was like famous when I was younger, and I was just like, oh my God, I love her. But then I didn't really see anybody else. And, um, and then what I did see was just like stereotypes and, um, yeah, stereotypes and prejudice and racism and stuff like that. So that's how I saw and internalized like what being Indigenous was. And that really was harmful for me because it was like had internalized racism, and then I like saw other Indigenous peoples in that way too. And then I really tried to disconnect myself from being Native and try my best to being white or something appropriate to whiteness. It didn't ever work, but I really tried. And and I think because I didn't have that representation, those like role models, those like opportunities to see myself reflected in a good way, it really was like it was damaging. And I know that like that is a common experience for Indigenous peoples. So it's so cool to see, you know, that representation. And then my daughter saw Shaina Novalinga. My daughter saw her TikTok, and she drew on her Tanui at that time. And then my daughter was getting ready. This is maybe 3 or 4 years ago. Was getting ready to go to an Orange Shirt Day event. It makes me cry. But she was just like so proud of being a part of the Indigenous community, of being proud of being Inuk, that my daughter drew Tuni on her face and went down there just proudly being her. And she had that, you know, she had that experience because she saw Shina on TikTok. And yeah, so it's positive. Yeah.
So what do you think your younger self would say then if you could see all this now?
Oh man, um, that it's gonna be okay. And like my younger self experienced a lot of harm, and I'm trying to like forgive myself reacting to that. So just I forgive my younger self, and I think if I could tell my younger self now, like, believe in yourself, believe in your power, believe in your voice, and what other people think of you is not a true reflection of who you are. And yeah,
What do you think your ancestors would say?
rock on. Just kidding. um, I think that they believe in me, that they believe in my purpose, that they would believe, you know, maybe individually, but collectively and within community, that they believe in us. Even though we're not like living the way that we used to, we're adapting and we're surviving and we're thriving in, you know, in today's context. And I think that's what they would want us to know.
How has the community received your work?
I think there are a lot of like, it's been mostly positive. I think like I get invited to things and I speak in front of people, and you know, people see value. That's like such a hard. I don't know. I'm so humble. It's hard to feel or talk about recognition in that way, and I think that's another thing that my younger self and other Inuit or Indigenous folks need to kind of reclaim, because it's okay to be proud of yourself and proud of your accomplishments, I guess. And I think a lot of what the work that I've done has been received well, but I know that a lot of my work has not been received well, and I think creating space to have those conversations where it's like, it's not being led by one single worldview, or I have to be accountable to, you know, and adapt to their accountability. I think it needs to be like a shared space where we have conversations that are open and honest. However, like, I am not taking, you know, I'm still going to believe in myself whether they are creating barriers for me. Yeah.
What's the most impactful event you've spoken at?
I think one of the most, I think it was in 2018, the City of Calgary renamed Langevin Bridge to the Reconciliation Bridge. And I somehow got on the radar to the planning committee, and they asked me to come and be with the Indigenous folks of this area, and they invited me to come and speak at that event and be a part of their ceremony. And that was like one of my first like big public events. There were a lot of people there, but I just really, it was meaningful because of like what my mom had gone through and what I had gone through, and then seeing just like, you know, people being at peace and healing and understanding. That was, yeah, it was cool.
That would be cool. Where do you hope to see your work go in the future?
I don't know. I keep thinking about that. I think I want, right now, like, advocacy for me is like Inuit specific, rather it being like Indigenous, like broadly, like Indigenous issues broadly. Like I'm focusing on issues and realities that are Inuit specific. And I really hope like my work will, you know, of critical, you know, thinking and reflecting on like the purposes in the spaces that are meant to serve all Indigenous peoples, and then where I see for other Indigenous voices, like Inuit voices. And, you know, I really hope, like, I know right now I'm in my undergrad, I'm in my third year at the University of Calgary, and I'm majoring in international Indigenous studies. But I know that I'm going to go get my master's, and I know that I'm going to get my PhD, because I think Dr. Kilabuk sounds really cool. And, you know, make, like, and be a part of and contribute to education and, you know, creating knowledge and, you know, I don't mind starting new projects where it's new to everyone. And then I hope, like, whatever I do, other Inuit behind me have, you know, have the foundation that they need to attend to that. And then they can, you know, branch off of those things and focus on things specifically. And then, yeah, that's kind of where I hope to be.
How important is it to dismantle the Indigenous monolith, you know?
Well, I think it's very important, but it's also like, it's important because, like, when people say Indigenous in Canada, it represents First Nation, Métis, and Inuit. And when like Indigenous specific like teaching and learning opportunities are solely like organized to speak about like First Nation issues, realities, worldviews, it really like narrows future advocacy. I think this is one of the things that I've been thinking about, because Inuit have such like different different effects and impacts from settler colonialism, like how are folks going to, like who go to work in policy or go to work for like truth and reconciliation, or go to work for indigenization, or support those like non-indigenous peoples, to support those initiatives. And the only context that they get is First Nation or Métis specific. That means a whole entire peoplehood, history, values, beliefs, experiences are being neglected. So where we want growth in those areas too. And so I really feel like contesting Indigenous spaces to ignore Inuit, not, I don't know, maybe it's ignoring, maybe it's not on purpose, but it's important to, you carve out space for other realities to better, better prepare the future. And that's like everything that I do is like, it's based up from Maligate, like the, Inuit natural laws of like, we're maintaining balance and peace, and planning and preparing for the future. And there are two more, but I can't remember. But those two things are really, really important to me. And that is how I live my life, is where to maintain harmony, to balance everything else, and then, ensure that the future generations are prepared for whatever's coming at them. And then they have in turn, they have the abilities to plan and prepare for the future too.
Thank you. What does it mean to you to be a treaty person?
I think I acknowledge that I'm on the traditional territories of the Niitsitapi, the Stoney Nakoda, the Tsuut'ina, and the Métis regions. I know that they recently just changed. It used to be 3, but I think it's now like 5 and 6. So I recognize that I live here, and because the first 3 signed treaty, right? And because of that, I'm able to thrive in this area, raise my family, put down opportunities and live out a good life because of that. And so in reciprocity for that, I try my best to uplift, empower, Treaty 7 people's initiatives, and like volunteering for events, or like planning events, or like, whatever issue, or it doesn't even have to be issue, but issues or events, or like, opportunities where they're thriving. I try to uplift and move them forward as well. Like, I think that's that's what it means to be a treaty person for me.
What does truth and reconciliation look like to you?
I don't know. I guess it changes, because I really had a lot of, I guess, discourse around like truth and reconciliation politically. I really believed in like those like calls to action to move forward, and the Indigenous experience and reality will get better eventually. But like just being a part of that for like the last 8 years, and seeing where people are currently situated, reconciliation is contested. Truth, though, I think truth is really, really important. And I know a lot of like elders and other Indigenous peoples like really emphasize we have to tell the truth first, acknowledge the truth, be honest with ourselves before we can even go into reconciliation. But then recently I read an article by I think Christine Ladner. I know her last name is Ladner for sure, and the article is from 2018. But she explains reconciliation through creation stories, which I thought was a very interesting perspective. But a lot of the like creation stories that she chose, like the community was in turmoil, and there was a lot of tension and or change had to happen to eliminate turmoil. And so then after all of that, all of those actions and accepting what it is and what could be better, that's when reconciliation happens. And I think accepting, yeah, kind of looking at it like that and kind of reflecting a little bit more, how can we learn from this turmoil? And I don't know, like I'm not confident. I don't know. I'm not confident. I'm not confident in it, but I really feel like there is a purpose, and I really acknowledge the incredible hard work of the Indigenous community members who made that happen, because they had to go through a lot of stuff. And I think it's just, I haven't figured out how it's going to work out for me personally. Yeah.
Can you speak on what land back means?
Yes. Okay, yeah. I was thinking about this morning. And I don't really know if I understand that back. And because there's so many different definitions, and so many people have perceptions of it differently. But for me, because of land back movement and initiatives, like I feel like I believe in the land, and so I was given back the land. The land now believes in me. And so I have like a clear connection to land in that way. Yeah, that's kind of how I see land back right now. Yeah.
What is the proper terminology when referring to Inuit?
It's not Eskimo. And I think when we talk about Inuit, we have to understand, and other people have to understand, that Inuit are from, in Alaska, and they're all across the world to Russia. So Inuit are diverse, and there are many different, honoring that, Inuit have, diverse experiences, diverse perspectives, that it's just not one image of, like it's not just one image, it's not just one person, it's a whole entire, like it's across the world. And acknowledging, and like acknowledging that there are we're more than Inukshuks, we're more than igloos, we're more than dog sleds. We we are a culture, we are a peoplehood, we have our worldviews, we have our distinct languages, and I think yeah, that's how I see Inuit. So, my gosh, after working for a couple of years in community as an advocate for Indigenous worldviews, being in nonprofits, I realized folks were really not ready to have those conversations. And it was kind of, even though I was like hired in these like race-based specific roles to, expand the organization's knowledge and perceptions of Indigenous experience and values and beliefs and worldviews and issues, it was not being taken seriously. And I was just like, well, what the heck is going on here? And so I decided that I wanted to go back to school. And then I heard about the International Indigenous Studies program at the University of Calgary. And so I applied and I went into, and I think it's really, such a cool program. Like there's a lot of work is being done to, extend Indigenous knowledge systems within academia, within those spaces. But like in my first year, of my degree, I realized that Inuit were not being represented or being acknowledged in those like Indigenous specific teaching and learning opportunities. So then I've been trying to figure out since then, like why, like why not, and I and change that. It's I don't know, it's being contested right now. Some of it, sometimes it's being accepted, but sometimes others are, not feeling good about Inuit experiences being a part of the curriculum, because some folks believe that means we're taking away from other Indigenous people's experiences, and that if our knowledge is being honored in that space, their knowledge is going to be diminished, enroached, or terminated. And yeah, it's weird.
Must be frustrating.
It is frustrating.
You can honor two different perspectives at the same time.
And just like it's building connection, and I'm not asking for all of the Indigenous space. Like I'm not doing that. But like, what if one class was just devoted to, Inuit experiences, Inuit values, and that lecture, creates a firm understanding of who Inuit are and what we believe in context to indigeneity, to Indigenous issues, to Indigenous experiences. And maybe it's a book, or maybe it's like a discussion. Like I'm not asking for all this space. Like I'm just, I feel like if we're talking about Indigenous, if we're talking about Indigenous, that does include Inuit too. And yeah, it's been hard. I think a big part of being an urban Inuk, it's hard to connect with other Inuit in these settings. And I think creating opportunities where we are able to like meet with one another and like share common experience and share, laughter and, joy and vitality and in urban environments, I think is very important for urban Inuit, because we often feel so disconnected from our families, our lands, our communities, and coming together in solidarity, in partnership, in it's really important to the urban Inuit experience. And then just kind of like opening that up to like, I don't know, maybe even creating our own value systems and our own belief systems to where it purposes us to where we are right now. And I think because my kids are urban, they were born in the city, live in the city, and are growing up in the city, and they're probably not going to leave the city. And however, I want them to feel validated and feel comfortable and feel like they have a space to be Inuk, or learn about like traditional Inuit things. Like I'm just thinking like high kicks, or throat singing, or carving, or all of those cool things. It's very limited, especially in funding, and I think that really needs to be talked about like nationally, in organizations that represent us Inuit, to really think about their policies and their framework to better attend to the needs of urban Inuit. Because there's like 1 in 4 Inuit are now living down south, which is wild.
It's that many now, eh?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's mostly in Ontario.
Yeah.
And the East Coast too.
Yeah, and Edmonton.
Oh, right.
Edmonton, Winnipeg, Montreal, Ottawa, Halifax. Like, they're like, Inuit have infiltrated those areas.
Come down from the tree line. I guess in Valley have trees though.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're right there.
Yeah, I saw trees there. It's very sparse, but there are definitely trees. It's wild.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Do you miss home, like Nunavut?
Yeah, I do. And I really hope, like, eventually, like, in the future, I'll have more opportunity to go home and, I don't know, be part of the tundra again. When I went home last April, my cousins Jeremy and Maya took me on a skidoo ride, and we went to the middle of nowhere. And there's just like rocks and snow and nothing else. And I remember that I was so quiet that I could hear my own heartbeat. Like that was it. I've never been like I can't remember ever being in a place like that, but it's beautiful. And I love the cold. And I really want to like go home and like take care of elders in my community, in my family, and just like I take care of them, they take care of me, and be a part of a community, to be a part of the community again, where I'm not like a child anymore, but as an adult, where I can learn and teach and live well.
Yeah, it doesn't get very cold down here, hey?
No.
I always feel bad for the huskies.
But I also love to be warm, so it's like, I don't know.
The trade-off.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I miss home too.
Yeah, I'm definitely love suburb living in the city. At least it's like, I don't know, you kind of feel a little bit isolated from like the chaos the city can bring. But it's really cool to have like other different opportunities that the city offers. Like I went downtown last night for the Tanya Tagak concert, but then there's like this block heater thing happening like all down Stephen Ave, and there's just like events and funky people and music and stuff like that. Like that's really cool. But I only want to visit those moments. I don't want to live like that always.
Well, I think you might have answered this, but how do you stay connected to culture than being urban?
I think I really have to be mindful of it. I think, singing and writing poetry and practicing like throat singing is really important to me. But then I also like, right now I'm wearing my comics as my slippers. I, try to invest in tattoos and pieces that are like incredibly meaningful to me. I listen for stories and, other Inuit, and I listen to what they have to offer. And I read a lot. And I think that's like kind of not valued in in maintaining like a connection to Inuit identity and Indigenous identity, because we come from like an oral background, and our pedagogy is like observation, experience, and then teaching and mentoring. I don't always get that here, so I really look for cultural continuity in books, in videos, in connection, and talking to you and stuff like that. So it's social media as well. Like there's strong forms of connection, and I feel like I have a good grasp on how our worldview operates, and I kind of have that filter of when I do read or observe and watch in different ways, and take what I need for growth. And yeah. Well, I think it's just like it is just building now. And I was looking at my my time hop memories to this morning, and Marianne Forbes and I hosted our first like Inuit community meetup in Calgary on this day last year, which is really, really cool. And we just wanted to build, create a space where Inuit can come and just be, Inuk. And there was a few of us there that time. But now there's like a monthly meetup at the Central Library. And I think that is really, really cool. I'm also like, because I'm at university, I don't know, I don't get to do anything because I'm a mom. And like I have no social life. I'm a mom, I'm a student, I have a job. So it's very rare that I get to go out. But I'm trying to build that community at the University of Calgary, because I learned there are 28 Inuit students at the University of Calgary this
28
year.
of us?
Yeah, 28. And so like,
Wow.
yeah, so, which is wild. And so I'm trying to like work with the university and the Arctic Institute of North America, which is, I don't know, weird a little bit, but they're also looking for, partnership and building relationship with Inuit, so that the Arctic Institute's like purpose is actually meaningful for Inuit and the Arctic. And so they're trying to build relationship with Inuit students as well. So we're trying to create that, community, and then try to have opportunities where we can meet up, have kwak, eat bannock, and yeah, just be Inuk together.
He lived there's 28.
Yeah.
There was like 6.
I know, me too. But yeah, there's 28 of us there right now.
Wow.
And last year it was 25. So we've gained 3. So that's quite a bit. Mm-hmm.
That is a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. I'm shocked.
Mm-hmm. Because you and I are both academics. We're within academia, and we both are knowledgeable about like the harm that has been done upon Inuit communities, especially in terms of research. Like I remember, like my Ayakuluk said in her dissertation that she doesn't know how many people she has helped gain accolades within universities and in that institution, like doctorates and, published papers and stuff like that. And then that stuff never comes to the community. And then there's a joke where some Inuit call researchers like six, like
Ground
little,
squirrels?
yeah, like ground squirrels, because they're just like looking for information. And then I heard another joke where like, who is in Inuit family, and they're like a mom, a dad, a grandma, a daughter, and a researcher, which I think is hilarious.
I find the research is often harmful when it comes from a non-Inuit
Yeah.
lens.
Yeah.
Because they don't understand the complexities within, our culture, or cultures, I should say, as we're diverse. But especially when, we might come across as simple people when you first encounter us, especially up north. We don't like to explain things. We don't like to speak too much. We don't like questions. But there's reasons behind all those. And, most of these, Kablunak who come into these spaces, they don't take the time to understand the reasons behind those things. So the bias is so heavy. It's kind of frustrating sometimes.
It definitely is. And I think I know that there's a paradigm shift happening with the relationship of research in Inuit Nunagat or Inuit Nuna and the communities of there. But there's also I'm a researcher, because I am now a researcher. I have that title because I do research, and I fell into it by accident, but then I realized how cool it is, and how important it is as well. And I think, transforming research relationships where it's like Inuit led, Inuit informed, Inuit created, like that, that is important. And I think because I'm like so embedded in the, academic space, there's opportunity to like transform, policies because of research, but only if it's done in like a good way, and only if we have the consent of our communities. And I know that research, like the word research, deters people from like getting in there. But if we kind of like look at it differently, like it's, creating knowledge, and then, which is really important to our worldview, and like Inuit Kayumaya Tukani, where, that's where knowledge like goes eventually. So like, I don't know, contextually and contemporarily in this moment, research can be, could be utilized to support and maintain like Inuit communities. Yeah.
It's important we are the ones sharing that knowledge, or like you're saying, creating that knowledge. Yeah, that's crazy. It's cool, hey, to be a part of that.
Yeah, it is. It's actually it's wild, and I try not to think about it like too hard. But it's like, I don't know, it has created a lot of opportunities too for me. So, and then, like I said earlier, like planning and preparing for the future, like that's how I see research as a tool for that. Like I am unveiling a bunch of stuff and I'm creating knowledge around different areas, but I'm not going to be able to, answer to every complexity of that. And so hopefully, future Inuit like scholars or current ones are able to be like, this is my interest. I feel like I can go there and do this, and create a relationship with it to create knowledge. I think that's kind of how I see it, because it's like there's such a weird like validation that you become an expert in academia. And I think like one of the greatest advice that I've ever received is that I'm smart enough to know that I don't really know anything, and that learning is ongoing. And you can, start education or starting to learn something new can happen at any age. And I think that's like from connecting and feeling confident in my like Inukness is acknowledging that, yeah, maybe I didn't have all of these like experiences, like, or I have, but like if I haven't gone hunting for a while, or, those like different notions of like Inuit identity, or teaching myself how to throat sing, or like, those things, like I felt confident in doing that because I realized that you can learn from any age. And I really wish, all of us Inuit, honored that part of themselves. So it's important.
Well, how important is representation in academia specifically?
Well, I think it's really important, but it's hard because I can't represent all Inuit, but it's like it's creating a platform. It's creating opportunities where Inuit, like diverse Inuit voices and experiences, are being like uplifted and validated in academia. And because like in urban settings and across Canada, not when we're referring to non-Indigenous communities, that are trying to ascertain to Indigenous realities, like there's like a conflation of what indigeneity means, and I think that to have Inuit representation in academia will narrow that belief, and then also like create opportunities and then limit barriers, I guess. because the education is what we have to do now. Like not everybody, but it's just like, I don't know, post-secondary is such a thing in our lives now, and why not be a part of it, and why not have us lead it?
Like that. The Black would say, education is the new buffalo. It's our caribou.
Yeah, yeah. Nakamik, thank you for, being here and coming into my home and having a conversation and, creating opportunities and sharing advocacy in such a good, in a good way. And Inuit, believe in yourselves. Don't give up. And yeah.
Wanna?